So I watched conference reports videos on this naive attitude of why can't we all just get along, and kind of the sort of luxury of being able to ask that question when living in such a society of plenty, and mentions the John Lennon song "Imagine" as the hypocrisy that, considering how John Lennon lived. Um, and then it goes on to say that to create this sort of peaceful, egalitarian society that would require massive amounts of taxation, huge redistribution of wealth. Um, I kind of have to disagree. I mean, not entirely, because there would have to be some transfer of certain kinds of wealth. Um, Certain kinds of wealth would have to be made common, and there would have to be tax reform, but not necessarily higher taxation for most people. Um, this brings me to the most underrated economist of all time. Bring up again, Henry George, and his proposed remedy, of course, was to tax the unimproved value of land, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you consider uh, how land is, how the privatization of land, privatization of the commons in general, um, allows some people to enrich themselves by the plunder of resources uh, while depriving others of the gifts of nature. At the same time, leading to inefficient use of the land, which cuts down on employment, and eh, and also deprives laborers of the product of their labor. Um, there's he's saying that if we tax land so that tax land, basically tax natural resources, tax what people take from the commons, um, then essentially you've you've made it impossible to make a fortune through such speculation, and instead have to actually uh, make efficient use of other world's resources, and in order to make profit, you have to be productive, and so wealth would be based not on exploitation but on production. Um, and so that would lead to a greater equality, not full equality, but a sort of Rawlsian equality where even the least well off have their lot improved to the maximum degree that they can. And those making more, who are making more money, who are becoming more wealthy, are doing so largely um, by creating more production, providing jobs, and satisfying demand. So I just want to read a passage from here where he goes into just the effects that such a shift in our tax system, in our system of property, would have on it. Consider the effects of such a change upon the labor market. Competition would no longer be one-sided as now. Instead of laborers competing with each other for employment, and in the competition cutting down wages to the point of bare subsistence, employers would everywhere be competing for laborers, and wages would rise to the fair earnings of labor. For into the labor market would have entered the greatest of all competition for the employment of labor. A competitor whose demand cannot be satisfied until want is satisfied, the demand of labor itself. The employers of labor would not have merely to bid against other employers, all feeling the stimulus of greater trade and increased profits, but against the ability of laborers to become their own employers upon the natural opportunities freely opened to them by the tax which prevented monopolization. With natural opportunities thus free to labor, with capital and improvements exempt from tax, in exchange released from restrictions, the spectacle of willing men unable to turn their labor into things they are suffering for would become impossible. The recurring paroxysm which paralyzed society would cease. Every wheel of production would be set in motion. Demand would keep pace with supply, and supply with demand. Trade would increase in every direction, and wealth augmented on every hand. Yeah. So this guy was more than just an economist. I mean, he was a prophet, and I think it's a shame that he's been so forgotten, and we've kind of developed back into this capitalism versus socialism paradigm when he was offering us the greatest synthesis of the best aspects of both systems. Um, and so, yeah, I do believe that a better world is possible, and it needn't be that all that hard on people. In fact, there's another passage I want to read. It's just about where he gets even more wide-eyed and utopian. If I can find it here. Yes, here we go. Consider the possibilities of a state of society that gave that opportunity to all. Let imagination fill out the picture. Its colors grow too bright for words to paint. Consider the moral elevation, the intellectual activity, the social life. Consider how by 1,000 actions and interactions the members of every community are linked together, and how in the present condition of things even the fortunate few who stand upon the apex of the social pyramid must suffer, though they know it not, from the want, ignorance, and degradation that are underneath. Consider these things and then say whether the change I propose would not be for the benefit of everyone, even the greatest landholder. Would he not be safer of the future of his children in leaving them penniless in such a state of society than in leaving them the largest fortune in this? Did such a state of society anywhere exist? Would he not buy entrance to it cheaply by giving up all his possessions? And so the point is, this kind of society would be beneficial even to the person who has everything, but has to live in in this in a gated community, a kind of guarded fortress, away from the hands of the hungry masses. That actually even the most well off would, although they have to make some sacrifices, would gain so much more through the kind of society they would inherit. And so, I am an incurable optimist. I do believe that utopia is possible, and I believe that the solutions are out there for how to achieve that. And although I don't think Henry George had the complete picture of how to achieve this society, he was very much on the right track, and his reforms would be a big part of that. So that's my thoughts for now. Peace.